The voice was the Great Spirit, the I Am. Zarathustra, being all pure, taught that to be a faithist in the voice as it comes to the pure was the highest that man could obtain. Zarathustra, being all pure, taught that to build up one's own faith in the I Am would produce the highest happiness. Zarathustra, being all pure, taught that each self must learn to build up itself in love and wisdom, and after them, power, trusting in the I Am. As the voice came to Zarathustra, they all pure, Zarathustra perceived that the I Am must have a name in order to be distinguished by men. Zarathustra said, or, parentheses light, Maz, parentheses entity of, and he called the highest known, or Maz, being the person, the All-Master. Or Maz spoke to Zarathustra, saying, some I have created with desire to dance, some with desires to sing, some with desires to pray. Some I have created with faith in men, some with faith in spirits, some with faith in me only. Let those who have faith in men have faith in men. Let those who have faith in spirits have faith in spirits. Let those who have faith in me have faith in me. The last are mine. What is mine I will gather together. Mine shall be a people by themselves, of themselves. Or Maz spoke to Zarathustra, saying, mine have no gods but me. Mine have no idols or images of me. Mine do not bow down before idols. Mine covenant in my name secretly. Mine remember the 4 sacred days of the moon. Mine honor their parents. Mine kill nothing I have made alive. Mine do not commit adultery. Mine do not steal, tell lies, or covet anything. Mine return good to all men. Zarathustra taught these words, and those who were followers styled themselves Zarathustrians. Or Maz spoke to Zarathustra, saying, take the 10 suggestions. What are they? Zarathustra said, my flesh is not my own substance, but Armazd. How can then I claim the 10 suggestions? These then are not the Zarathustrian laws, they are the Armazdian laws. All things come from him, all things are his. Zarathustra went forth proceeding, and his followers numbered hundreds of thousands. Zarathustra worked no miracles. He said miracles were the tricks of spirits and mortals. The highest of all good was to do good and be good. God did not give to Zarathustrians as he did to the Israelites, to move among strangers, but to dwell amid the heathen within their own countries. And the Zarathustrians never established kings of their own. Nevertheless, they fell into constant persecution by the worshippers of gods and lords. By the time of Brahma, they were nearly destroyed, and again, God raised them up and established them as a mighty people. But being non-resistant, they were again nearly destroyed. And again, God raised them up through Kapilah. This was in the time of Moses. And they prospered and became numerous in all of Vidu and Japheth. For 400 years, they were great people. And about the time the Israelites made Saul their king, darkness came upon the Zarathustrians also. The lords and saviors, through the oracles, inspired the kings and rulers to despoil the Zarathustrians. And for 900 years, they were persecuted and tortured, and millions of them put to death, so that the name of Zarathustra was forgotten among men. And the great learning and light and knowledge of those nations went out, nor to return for a long season. God said, because they have persecuted and destroyed my chosen, I will turn my face away from them, and they shall go down in darkness. Behold, when they persecuted my chosen in the land of Egypt, I shut out the light from them, and they perished. Let this be a testimony to all peoples, that whosoever divides my people or despoils them shall also be divided and despoiled. This is the law of Jehovah. Whoever goes away from him shall not find him. To turn from him is to curse him. To curse him is to curse those that do it, and it shall be answered to them.
Who you are, one nation under a thugging bullet sky. Two people in this world, only two. Two peoples in this world, only two. Yeah, and I know you'll be thinking, two people in this world, yeah, male and female. No. There's only two people in this world. Those who kill, those who do not kill. Those who shed blood and those who do not shed blood. Those who war and those who do not war. These are the two people, according to Jehovah. Jehovah, the creator of all things. Let's go to the Oahspe Indian. Why should we go to the Oahspe Indian? Because my mind's on a different wave. Oahspe. Should we start with the prophecy? Hit me. Hold on. Share this one instead. Let's do that. Okay. Right.
An ancient Hopi prophecy states that when the blue star Kachina makes its appearance in the heavens, the fifth world will emerge. It also speaks about the manifestation of 9 signs foretelling this world-changing event. Could it be happening right now? In long-forgotten times, people inhabiting Earth had a very different connection to the spirit world than we have today. The peaceful people, the Hopi, have been living in northeastern Arizona since they can remember and are believed to be descendants from cultures to the south, east, and north. The Hopi believe the star people and their star knowledge will return at the end of the current period of time as they have in past times. Their entire mythology is built upon the assumption that the world goes through successive cycles separated by cataclysmic events. According to their legends, at the time of the Blue Kachina, the star people retreated to the heart of the earth, seeking shelter during the world's destruction. Passed down from generation to generation, their intriguing mythology describes the event. First, the Blue Kachina would start to be seen at the dances and would make his appearance known to the children in the plaza during the night dance. This event would tell us that the end times are very near. Then the blue star Kachina would physically appear in our heavens, which would mean that we were in the end times. When the first world was destroyed, people returned from the ground to the outer world to live as ants for the continuation of the second world. The third world tells of an advanced civilization with flying shields and wars between far-off cities ultimately destroyed by terrible floods, narratives very similar to those found in Babylonian mythology. Hopi Indians are now wardens of the fourth world in exchange for the benefit of living on Earth. They consider the coming of the fifth world is near and will begin when members of the Fire Clan return. The Hopi claim that 4 stone tablets of creation exist. In ancient times, these tablets were given to them by Masao, the guardian of the underworld, who requested that the tablets be kept until a number of signs were fulfilled at the end of the fourth world and the beginning of the fifth. When the signs appeared, the Hopi were advised to reveal the tablets and their prophecies to the world regarding the purification of earth. The 9 signs of destruction were described by author Bob Frisell, and something in this book is true. The signs were described to him in 1958 by a Hopi elder named Whitefeather. Number 1. We are told of the coming of the white-skinned men, like Pahana, but not living like Pahana. Men who took the land that was not theirs, and men who struck their enemies with thunder. Number 2. Our lands will see the coming of spinning wheels filled with voices. In his youth, my father saw this prophecy come true with his own eyes. Number 3. A strange beast like a buffalo, but with great long horns, will overrun the land in large numbers. These Whitefeather saw with his own eyes too. Number 4. The land will be crossed by snakes of iron. Number 5. The land shall be crisscrossed by a giant spider web. 6. The land shall be crisscrossed with rivers of stone that make pictures in the sun. Number 7. You will hear of the sea turning black, and many living things dying because of it. Number 8. You will see many youths who wear their hair long like my people come and join the tribal nations to learn their ways and wisdom. Number 9. You will hear of a dwelling place in the heavens, above the earth, that shall fall with a great crash. It will appear as a blue star. Very soon after this, the ceremonies of my people will cease. Many believe the first 8 signs have already been fulfilled. The first sign can be interpreted as the arrival of Europeans on the North American continent. The second is a reference to the early exploration of America using the wagon as a primary means of locomotion. The next 3 signals point to other European influences, such as the arrival of cattle and the emergence of railroads and telephone lines. The rivers of stones mentioned in the 6th sign can only be roads and highways. The 8th sign is pretty self-explanatory and encapsulates the symptoms of worldwide pollution. The Hopi believe that increased toxicity levels in the Earth's oceans are a clear indication that the second to last sign is already upon us. There is no doubt we are in the final hours of an old world. On June 8th of the year 2000, a Hopi elder gave us another prophecy, which included instructions for all of mankind. The elder said, "You have been telling people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell the people that this is the hour, and there are things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Are you in right relation? Where is your water? Know your garden. It is time to speak your truth. Create your community. Be good to each other, and do not look outside of yourself for your leader." Then he clapped his hands together, smiled, and said, "This could be a good time. There is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, keep our eyes open and our heads above water. And I say, see who is in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey come to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Just adds to the confusion. You're already confused. That's what you're trying to say. You are already confused, so it adds to the confusion. Your confusion. You see what I'm saying? Your confusion. No, I'm not confused. This just clarifies, edifies on certain things that I already know. Yeah. I've become somewhat conceited in my own way, in my own right. Now, we shall keep going further. Hold on. Let's share this. Jehovah.
Okay, so during the day, wala na yung study for explaining, okay? Okay, have it, we'll be done, okay? Okay?
After the creation of man, the Creator, Jehovah, said to him, "So that you shall know you are the work of my hand, I have given you capacity for knowledge, power, and dominion." This was the first era. But man was helpless. Neither did he stand upright, nor understand the voice of the Almighty. And Jehovah called to his angels, who were older than the earth, and he said to them, "Go, raise man upright, and teach him to understand." So the angels of heaven descended to the earth and raised man upright, and man wandered about on the earth. This was the second era. Jehovah said to the angels who were with man, "Behold, man has multiplied on the earth. Bring them together. Teach them to dwell in cities and nations." So the angels of Jehovah taught the peoples of the earth to dwell together in cities and nations. This was the third era. Now in that same time, the beast, self, rose up before man and spoke to him, saying, "Possess whatever you will, for all things are yours and are good for you." Man obeyed the beast, and war came into the world. This was the fourth era. And man became sick at heart, and he called out to the beast, saying, You said, Possess all things for yourself, for they are good for you. Now, behold, war and death have encompassed me on all sides. I pray, therefore, teach me peace. But the beast said, Do not think I come to send peace on the earth. I come not to send peace, but a sword. I come to set man at variance against his father, and a daughter against her mother. Whatever you find to eat, whether fish or flesh, eat it, taking no thought of tomorrow. So man ate fish and flesh, becoming carnivorous, and darkness came upon him, and he no longer heard the voice of Jehovah, or believed in him. This was the fifth era. And the beast divided itself into 4 great heads, and possessed the earth. And man fell down and worshipped them. The names of the heads of the beast were Brahmin, Buddhists, Christian, and Mohammedan. And they divided the earth and apportioned it between themselves, choosing soldiers and standing armies for the maintenance of their earthly aggrandizement. And the Brahmins had 7 million soldiers, the Buddhists 20 million, the Christians 7 million, and the Mohammedans 2 million, whose trade was killing man. And man, in service of the beast, gave 1/6 of his life and his labor to war and standing armies, and 1/3 to dissipation and drunkenness. This was the 6th era. Jehovah called out to man to desist from evil, but man could not hear him, for the cunning of the beast had changed man's flesh, so that his soul was hidden as if in a cloud, and he loved sin. Jehovah called to his angels in heaven, saying, Go down to the earth once more, to man, whom I created to inhabit the earth and enjoy it, and say to him, Thus says Jehovah, Behold, the 7th era has begun. Your Creator commands your change from a carnivorous man of contention to an herbivorous man of peace. The 4 heads of the beast shall be put away, and there shall be no more war on the earth. Your armies shall be disbanded, and from this time forward, whoever desires to not war, you shall not force into military service, for it is the commandment of your Creator. Neither shall you have any God, Lord, or Savior, but only your Creator, Jehovah. And you shall worship none other from this time forward forever. I am sufficient for my own creations. And to all who separate themselves from the dominion of the beast, making these covenants to me, I have given the foundation of my kingdom on earth. And all such people shall be my chosen, by their covenants and their works. They shall be known on the earth from this time forward as mine, and shall be called faithists. But to those who will not make these covenants, I have given the numbers of the beast, and they shall be called Uzzians, signifying destroyers. And from this time forward, these shall be the 2 kinds of people on earth, faithists and Uzzians. So the angels of heaven descended to the earth to man and appeared before him face to face, hundreds of thousands of them, speaking as man speaks, writing as man writes, and teaching these things about Jehovah and his works. And in the 33rd year of the angel's descent, the ambassadors of the angel hosts of heaven, in the name of Jehovah, revealed to man his heavenly kingdoms through this Oahspe, making known the plan of his delightful creations for the resurrection of the peoples of the earth. Not immaculate is this book, Oahspe, but to teach mortals how to attain to hear the Creator's voice, and to see his heavens in full consciousness while still living on the earth, and to know in truth the place and condition waiting for them after death. Neither are nor were the revelations in this Oahspe wholly new to mortals. The same things have been revealed at the same time to many who live at remote distances from one another, but who were not in correspondence till afterward. Because this light is comprehensive, embracing corporeal and spiritual things, it is called the beginning of the cosmic era. And because it relates to earth, sky, and spirit, it is called Oahspe.
The voice was the Great Spirit, the I Am. Zarathustra, being all pure, taught that to be a faithist in the voice as it comes to the pure was the highest that man could obtain. Zarathustra, being all pure, taught that to build up one's own faith in the I Am would produce the highest happiness. Zarathustra, being all pure, taught that each self must learn to build up itself in love and wisdom, and after them, power, trusting in the I Am. As the voice came to Zarathustra, they all pure, Zarathustra perceived that the I Am must have a name in order to be distinguished by men. Zarathustra said, or, parentheses light, Maz, parentheses entity of, and he called the highest known, or Maz, being the person, the All-Master. Or Maz spoke to Zarathustra, saying, some I have created with desire to dance, some with desires to sing, some with desires to pray. Some I have created with faith in men, some with faith in spirits, some with faith in me only. Let those who have faith in men have faith in men. Let those who have faith in spirits have faith in spirits. Let those who have faith in me have faith in me. The last are mine. What is mine, I will gather together. Mine shall be a people by themselves, of themselves. Oahspe spoke to Zarathustra, saying, Mine have no gods but me. Mine have no idols or images of me. Mine do not bow down before idols. Mine covenant in my name secretly. Mine remember the 4 sacred days of the moon. Mine honor their parents. Mine kill nothing I have made alive. Mine do not commit adultery. Mine do not steal, tell lies, or covet anything. Mine return good to all men. Zarathustra taught these words, and those who were followers styled themselves Zarathustrians. Oahspe spoke to Zarathustra, saying, Take the 10 suggestions. What are they? Zarathustra said, My flesh is not my own substance, but Oahspe's. How can then I claim the 10 suggestions? These then are not the Zarathustrian laws, they are the Oahspean laws. All things come from him, all things are his. Zarathustra went forth proceeding, and his followers numbered hundreds of thousands. Zarathustra worked no miracles. He said miracles were the tricks of spirits and mortals. The highest of all good was to do good and be good. God did not give to Zarathustrians as he did to the Israelites, to move among strangers, but to dwell amid the heathen within their own countries. And the Zarathustrians never established kings of their own. Nevertheless, they fell into constant persecution by the worshippers of gods and lords. By the time of Brahma, they were nearly destroyed, and again, God raised them up and established them as a mighty people. But being non-resistant, they were again nearly destroyed. And again, God raised them up through Capilla. This was in the time of Moses. And they prospered and became numerous in all of Vidu and Japheth. For 400 years, they were great people. And about the time the Israelites made Saul their king, darkness came upon the Zarathustrians also. The lords and saviors, through the oracles, inspired the kings and rulers to despoil the Zarathustrians. And for 900 years, they were persecuted and tortured, and millions of them put to death, so that the name of Zarathustra was forgotten among men. And the great learning and light and knowledge of those nations went out, nor to return for a long season. God said, Because they have persecuted and destroyed my chosen, I will turn my face away from them, and they shall go down in darkness. Behold, when they persecuted my chosen in the land of Egypt, I shut out the light from them, and they perished. Let this be a testimony to all peoples, that whosoever divides my people, or despoils them, shall also be divided and despoiled. This is the law of Jehovah. Whoever goes away from him shall not find him. To turn from him is to curse him. To curse him is to curse those that do it, and it shall be answered to them.
An ancient Hopi prophecy states that when the blue star Kachina makes its appearance in the heavens, the fifth world will emerge. It also speaks about the manifestation of 9 signs foretelling this world-changing event. Could it be happening right now? In long-forgotten times, people inhabiting Earth had a very different connection to the spirit world than we have today. The peaceful people, the Hopi, have been living in northeastern Arizona since they can remember and are believed to be descendants from cultures to the south, east, and north. The Hopi believe the star people and their star knowledge will return at the end of the current period of time as they have in past times. Their entire mythology is built upon the assumption that the world goes through successive cycles separated by cataclysmic events. According to their legends, at the time of the Blue Kachina, the star people retreated to the heart of the earth, seeking shelter during the world's destruction. Passed down from generation to generation, their intriguing mythology describes the event. First, the Blue Kachina would start to be seen at the dances and would make his appearance known to the children in the plaza during the night dance. This event would tell us that the end times are very near. Then the blue star Kachina would physically appear in our heavens, which would mean that we were in the end times. When the first world was destroyed, people returned from the ground to the outer world to live as ants for the continuation of the second world. The third world tells of an advanced civilization with flying shields and wars between far-off cities ultimately destroyed by terrible floods, narratives very similar to those found in Babylonian mythology. Hopi Indians are now wardens of the fourth world in exchange for the benefit of living on Earth. They consider the coming of the fifth world is near and will begin when members of the Fire Clan return. The Hopi claim that 4 stone tablets of creation exist. In ancient times, these tablets were given to them by Masao, the guardian of the underworld, who requested that the tablets be kept until a number of signs were fulfilled at the end of the fourth world and the beginning of the fifth. When the signs appeared, the Hopi were advised to reveal the tablets and their prophecies to the world regarding the purification of Earth. The 9 signs
This is Duke University.
Geneticists have to be extremely careful not to let descriptions of their work get carried away with enthusiasms about the level of genetic determinism involved in different traits. There really is a strong pressure to overstate, and there was, in fact, we work in HIV as well as hepatitis C, and there was, in fact, an example of this where there was a genetic finding reported that suggested that a genetic difference that is almost completely different between individuals of African and European ancestry, where you have one form that's the common form in much of many parts of Africa and another that's the common form outside of Africa. There was a study that suggested that this particular genetic difference had a gene called the Duffy locus, that this particular genetic difference influenced susceptibility to infection with HIV. And the study, in fact, was not a strong study. It did not have good controls. Yet, because it suggested that the form that was common in Africa made people more vulnerable to infection, because it was suggested that made people more vulnerable. In fact, Bill Clinton picked up on it, and when he visited Africa, he said, well, we now have this genetic explanation for why there's so much HIV in Africa. And that statement was wrong from every single perspective. The initial report of that finding, other groups tried to replicate and could not replicate. We do not believe it's true in the first place. And even if it were true, it is certainly not the case that you could infer from that the epidemic of HIV in Africa is in fact due to the underlying genetics as opposed to other things like behavior. So I think there we had a real example where the genetics was dramatically overstated by a very influential individual, and I don't fault him for that. I actually fault the scientific community for not being more careful about what it states as real, because what the scientific community states has an influence on people's thinking, even when it isn't true. And so when this was then corrected, as science does, correct itself over time, I don't imagine Bill Clinton has yet said, oh, by the way, what I said earlier isn't correct. And in fact, the New York Times covered this, and I don't think they've reported anything saying, well, now 4 papers have shown that, they can't replicate those results. So I think that's something that we need to be real careful of. And I suppose I would say that influential people, politicians and others, could probably do a little bit better job of being careful. For example, maybe you pick up the phone to a few geneticists before you decide to make a statement like that and say, hey, is this convincing? Is this solid? Because you wouldn't, in that case, have had to ask too many geneticists before you would have got some warning signs.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.
Hello, fellow students of Jewish history. Today, I'd like to ask a fascinating question, at least fascinating to me. Are the Lemba, who are a tribe of Africans living primarily in South Africa and Zimbabwe, are they genetically Jewish? They have a long oral tradition claiming descent from Judean migrants way, way back in the biblical period. And with modern genetic studies, there's some interesting evidence to suggest that what they're saying has a certain level of historic value. Now, before we get too deep in the subject, we have to first of all lay down the ground rules that genetics are not identity, right? The criteria to determine Jewish identity are far more complex and really depend on who you go to as your authority. The mainstream rabbinic view, which is embraced by Orthodox Jews to be sure, and for most of Jewish history over the last couple millennia, has been that Jews receive their identity in two ways, either through matrilineal descent, meaning they are born of a Jewish mother, or through conversion. And there's a whole bunch of discussions about what exactly that conversion means. In the late 20th century, the Reform movement adopted a patrilineal descent, claiming biblical precedent. And in fact, when you look at biblical texts, there are some really interesting things that suggest that it may have been patrilineal in the biblical period. But this is not a discussion for this point. You can see I have another video on it. It did definitely switch sometime in antiquity where Jews began to turn to the matrilineal model. For Orthodox Jews, it is the moment of Matan Torah. For others, historians look at different points. But at any rate, most Jews today regard it as matrilineal. I should say certainly Orthodox Jews. Jews from other denominations may have other definitions. What we don't have is the notion of bloodlines or of conformity to specific prophecies to say that a person is Jewish. I'm mentioning this because I got a lot of hate when I gave a couple of lectures on the history of the Jews of Africa and Oahspe. There's so many people who are upset about, you're not a real Jew, you're actually a Khazarian convert and stuff like that. We're not going to go into those things, but I will say that when we look at the Lemba and we look at genetic information, we can say that at least based on that kind of material, there's strong evidence to suggest that there is a Jewish connection to these people. This is something that has only been available in the late 20th century with the sequencing of the human genome. Let's go through some of this material. So first of all, who are the Lemba? They are Bantu-speaking Africans. There are 70,000 of them. They're primarily living in South Africa and Zimbabwe. They have an oral tradition that they're descended from white men who came from a place called Sena by boat. And the Sena might somehow be, they don't know exactly where it is. It might be Judea. It might be Sana'a, which is a place in Yemen. Then they came onto the African continent and they built Sena again, possibly in Tanzania or Kenya, and then again migrated and built it a third time, possibly in Mozambique, before they were engaged in the massive project of building Great Zimbabwe, which is this huge archaeological ruin that really indicates a massive civilization in southern Africa. At some point in what we would call the medieval period, they broke Jewish law by eating mice, not kosher, and then they were exiled throughout South Africa. If it was me and this was my one opportunity to break the laws of kashrut, I don't think mice would be my first choice, but at any rate, that's how it went. Now, what's Jewish about them? Well, they claim this Jewish descent, and in fact, they have lots of Jewish beliefs and practices. For example, they are monotheistic. They practice circumcision. Now, these two things are common also for Muslims in the region. But the Lemba also practice animal sacrifice, which seems to be more connected to a biblical past. They do not eat pork. Again, Muslims don't eat pork too. But they also don't eat milk and meat. Furthermore, they have other smaller practices that are very congruent with Jewish history, like they pay a lot of attention to the lunar.
We eat milk and meat, but we do not eat meat with milk. We don't mix meat and milk. We don't eat dairy products with meat. When we are going to eat meat. There are pods that are made for meat, and they are for meat, and there are pods for milk, and they are for milk, and there are pods for water. There are pods for water. Then there are pods for the grain that we cook into a paste, the wheats, the grains, right? And the grains ferment naturally to form what we call maheu. Maheu. Maheu is just natural fermentation of the grain, and it's a light beer that you eat, and then the heavy stuff, mostly for children, the watery stuff mostly for adults. Now the watery stuff, you can ferment it even more when you add fruits into it, and it becomes more alcoholic, and that's what we drink as alcohol. So it's fermented alcohol. But we do eat meat and milk, but we don't mix meat and milk. An example of this would be a hamburger. A hamburger has cheese and meat on it, which for us is not kosher. Cheese is a product of meat, of milk, or butter. Putting butter and you put meat on it, like a hamburger. A hamburger is a classic example that I can think of where we cannot do things like hamburgers. So I'll let my brother continue.
Calendar. So basically, their story is that they were led by a particular clan called the Buba, and they made their way from somewhere in the Middle East into Africa and eventually ended up primarily in South Africa and Zimbabwe. Now, what does the science say?
Now, Buba is a mispronunciation. It's actually Baba. Baba. Baba means father. So Buba, that's foreigners who say Buba. We say Baba. Baba. You would say Abba is to say father. We say Baba. So Baba means father. That's what it means in Shona. Baba is father. So they are our fathers. That's what we say. Because we say Abram, Abara, Hama. Yeah, Baba, Abba, 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 Abba. So you say Abba, we say Baba. You see. So out of mispronunciation, they say Buba. And we also don't say Lemba, we say Remba. It's the Swahili people who said Lemba because they could not say Remba. Because in our lexicon, we actually don't have L, X, and Q. That's how you know you're dealing with original. Remba. Yes, Remba. Another people without L, X, and Q I would find was Japan, that I found that they are also without L, X, and Q. Yes. So L, X, and Q is Muslim. That comes with the Muslim traders. We are not Muslim. So we say Remba. Yes. Remba.
So to understand that, we have to go back a little bit to look at the so-called Cohen gene. This is something that was discovered at the turn of the 20th century. Geneticists who worked on this major project and wrote a book about it called Jacob's Legacy, a genetic view of Jewish history. Very fascinating and really a very pleasant read too. I was laughed out loud at some points because he has a real great sense of humor. At any rate, what Goldstein and his extensive team did is they swabbed self-identified Jews and self-identified Kohanim to look for genetic patterns. They swabbed Ashkenazim and Sephardim. They did a lot of these swabs, for example, on the beach at Tel Aviv, but in other places around the world as well. And the bottom line in their research was they found that well over half of Jews who claimed to be Kohanim had a similar genetic feature, which they ended up calling the Cohen modal haplotype. Let me just back up for a second. I realized that maybe I didn't say this. Jews are divided in a patrilineal system. While the identity, the status of being Jewish is matrilineal, it comes through the mother, as we mentioned earlier. Tribal status, on the other hand, is derived from the father, right? So you know the 12 tribes that are described in the Bible and so on. But there's one tribe, the tribe of Levi, which was divided in two. There were brothers. One of them was Moses, i.e. the Moses, and the other was Aaron, also the Aaron, who was the first high priest. All the male descendants of Aaron were called in Hebrew Kohanim, or priests. And it goes through the male line exclusively. Now, thinking about genetics, of course, you're aware that women have two X chromosomes, men have an X and a Y chromosome. There's a lot more to say about differences between these two, but not for this video. But that means that all men receive their Y chromosome exclusively from their father. Whatever their father's Y chromosome had is what they've got on their Y chromosome. So this means that theoretically, every Kohen alive today has a Y chromosome that is like Aaron's chromosome a long, long time ago. Now, that's a fascinating kind of thing to measure, because we know that a lot of people today who claim to be Kohanim probably aren't. Even in the 18th century, the great Vilna Gaon, who was a firstborn child, and if you're a firstborn, you have to be redeemed in a special ritual with a Kohen. He was famous for performing this ritual for himself with every Kohen he met, because you could be absolutely sure that the last Kohen was a real Kohen. Maybe this one's a real Kohen. So he would do it over and over again just to make sure that he did it right. Most firstborns, like myself, for example, only had it done once, and that's enough already. But nevertheless, this represents the possibility that many people simply adopted the Kohen identity. It has a higher status, for example. So maybe like when they moved from Eastern Europe to America and people didn't know them, they might say, I think I'd like to be a Kohen. There's a lot of great jokes about that. So we don't know really how many of those Kohanim really are Kohanim and how many others really do descend from Aaron. So when we look at this Y chromosome, when Goldstein and his team looked at these Y chromosomes, they found out that amazingly, well over half of the people who claim to be Kohanim shared this single genetic footprint called the Cohen modal haplotype. That's fascinating, which confirms that there is this long tradition of Y chromosome descent that was preserved among Kohanim. And even more fascinating, when you calculate how far back these people had a common male ancestor, it works out just about 3,000 years ago, a little bit more than that, possibly a little less, depending on how long the generations are, which essentially is the same as our sensibility of when Aaron the Kohen lived. And so wow, it was an earth-shattering discovery. Lots of people were really interested in it. There is also fascinating material we discovered about the mother's descent, which is a little more difficult to measure because, of course, both the father and the mother contribute an X chromosome. But there is a thing called mitochondrial DNA, which is exclusively from the mother. And through the DNA in the mitochondria, it is possible to determine interesting things about women and their role in the genetic history of the Jewish people. We'll say more about that, God willing, in another lecture, but it is important to point out that we shouldn't be thinking exclusively about the men. One of the things that's really important about the Kohanim is that their wives maintain fidelity, meaning the sons of these women were, in fact, the sons of their husbands at the same time. Now, let's go back to the lemba, now that we have identified this Kohen gene, so-called Kohen gene. Several scholars working with Goldstein, including the great Tudor Parfit, a tremendous historian who's worked extensively in Africa, retrace the migration patterns described in the lemba tradition. They put that into context with the oral tradition that they have of descent from Judea. So we can, first of all, push aside the whole question of mitochondrial DNA, because when the lemba women were tested, there was no similarity to Jewish women. or Middle Eastern women. Their DNA was primarily similar to the African Bantu-speaking peoples among whom they lived. It's useful to note that the Lemba are very, very strict about their patrilineal descent, but not their matrilineal descent. Men, in other words, cannot convert to become a Lemba, but a woman may. There's a lot of really rigorous hazing kind of rituals that are associated with female conversion, including things like they have to crawl through an anthill and they have to eat these horrible emetics that cause them to vomit and that thus remove their impurities and really bizarre things like that. But in other words, the bottom line is that all Lemba men are the sons of prior Lemba men, but Lemba women can come from anywhere and can join the Lemba clan. And once again, that underlines the fact that by rabbinic status, the Lemba can't be Jewish because they don't have matrilineal descent. But what about the men? And what about the Y chromosome on the Lemba men? And here we go. This is really the answer to our question. They have a very, very high content of Semitic DNA, which is unlike the populations among whom they live, consistent with the idea of a migration from the Middle East. And more than that, they also have a surprisingly high incidence of the Cohen model haplotype, somewhere in the single digits for most Lemba, but among the Buba clan that was especially associated with leading the Lemba out of the Middle East, it's over 50%. Wow. Meaning that if we say that people who have the Cohen model haplotype are in fact Kohanim, which, you know, we don't have to say that at all, but many Kohanim have that same genetic feature. If we were to say that, then the Lemba might not be Jewish, but they are certainly descendants of Kohanim. Wow. So this should demonstrate that genetics is certainly not the same as identity. The Lemba themselves, although they claim Jewish descent, they have no problem with participating in Christian life and in Muslim life and going to churches and mosques and things like that. But it does indicate that if you're one of those fans of bloodlines, the Lemba seem to have a paternal bloodline that connects them to the same people, the same man possibly, that provided the basis of many of today's Jewish Kohanim. Okay, I hope you found this fascinating. I know I did. And I look forward to speaking with you in further lectures. Thanks very much for listening.
I'll be back. Gotta go for now.